The door to the executive suite closed with a soft click. California's sunlight poured through the glass walls of the high-rise, stretching across the polished floor of Volkov Enterprises. From 32 floors above San Francisco, the bay shimmered in the distance. The city moved. The markets moved. The world moved. Inside that office, nothing did. Kostya Volkov looked up from a contract worth $500 million and saw her standing there. Imani Brooks did not sit. She held a folder in both hands, not clutched, not trembling. Steady. His first reaction was irritation. They were supposed to meet later. He disliked interruptions, especially personal ones. Then he noticed the image clipped to the top page. Black and white, grainy, undeniable. His body stiffened before his face could. "No," he said. He had not even heard her speak yet. Mani stepped forward. The click of her heels was the only sound in the room. Outside the glass walls, assistants moved through the hallway, unaware that the foundation of their CEO's identity was about to fracture. "It's yours," she said. 3 words. Calm, direct. Kostya pushed back from his desk, slowly, rising to his full height. 6'3". Controlled posture. Perfectly tailored suit. Russian composure carved into every movement. "You need to think carefully before making claims like that," he replied. His accent sharpened when he felt cornered. It always did. Imani did not react to the warning in his tone. "It's not a claim." Silence. He had once said it in this very office, standing near that same window overlooking California wealth and innovation. "I don't date black women." He had said it casually, as if announcing a preference for red wine over white. She had heard it. She had not responded then. Now she stood before him, carrying proof that preference does not cancel consequence. Kostya looked at the sonogram again. The air shifted. "This isn't mine," he said. Too fast. Imani's grip on the folder tightened slightly, but her voice did not break. "You know it is." Outside, a junior assistant slowed her walk past the office. She could not hear the words. She did not need to. The posture alone told her something serious was unfolding. Kostya turned toward the window, his reflection staring back at him against the California skyline. Powerful, composed, untouchable, except he was not. The paper in her hand said otherwise. "Before we go further, tell me where you're watching from, and whether pride has ever cost someone you know something permanent." Kostya Volkov did not turn back to face her immediately. From the window, San Francisco looked calm. Boats cut across the water. Traffic flowed along the bridge. Investors moved money in seconds without emotion. Inside his office, emotion pressed against his chest. "You should have handled this differently," he said, still facing the glass. Imani Brooks let the silence sit between them before responding. "I handled it with dignity." That made him turn. Her voice held no anger, no desperation, just clarity. He walked back toward his desk and picked up the sonogram from the folder without asking permission. His eyes scanned the date. The clinic, the confirmation. You expect me to believe timing like this is coincidence? He asked. She did not blink. You know exactly when it happened. Memory flashed across his mind without permission. The late strategy session, the rain tapping against the office windows, the night he had allowed himself to forget his own rule. He placed the image back down. This complicates things, he said carefully. It was the language of business, not fatherhood. Imani's jaw tightened for the first time. It's not a merger. Kostya, he exhaled sharply. You think you understand what this does to my company? To investors? To my board? She took a step closer. I understand what it does to me. That landed. For the first time, he truly looked at her. Not as his strategy director, not as the woman he had once desired, but as someone carrying something that tied them permanently. You could have prevented this, he said. There it was. The shift of responsibility. Imani absorbed the accusation without raising her voice. Fought you? Silence returned, heavier now. Outside, one of the executive assistants pretended to rearrange files near the hallway desk. The tension in the office had grown visible. Raised shoulders, rigid posture, closed blinds halfway down. Kostya ran a hand through his hair. This cannot become public, he said. Imani's expression did not change. I didn't come here to negotiate silence. He stared at her as if she had spoken a foreign language. What do you want? He asked, finally. Her answer came without hesitation. Respect. The word hung in the air, longer than any accusation could have. Kostya had built his empire in California, on control, on discipline, on shaping narratives, before they shaped him. Now the narrative stood in front of him, wearing confidence and carrying proof. You're asking me to destroy my image, he said quietly. No, she replied. I'm asking you to face it. Kostya moved behind his desk again, not to sit, but to create distance. Distance gave him structure. Structure gave him control. You are emotional, he said, voice steadier now. This is not how serious matters are handled. Mani almost smiled at that. I'm not emotional, she replied. I'm informed. He pressed his palms lightly against the edge of the desk. The skyline framed him from behind like a portrait of authority. Russian discipline, California power, billionaire certainty, or at least the version of himself he preferred. You heard what I said months ago, he continued. I don't date black women. I made that clear. The words sounded weaker now, smaller than they once had. You didn't date me, she answered evenly. You chose me. That shifted the air again. He had no response ready for that distinction. The memory returned sharper this time. The way she had challenged his projections in the boardroom. The way she had refused to soften her tone when he tried to intimidate her. The way respect had grown before attraction ever did. You were aware of my position, he insisted. I was aware of your pride, she corrected. His jaw tightened. He stepped around the desk, closing the space between them again. Not aggressive, just close enough to test her resolve. You think this makes you powerful? He asked. She did not step back. No, she said quietly. It makes me responsible. That word unsettled him more than the accusation would have. Responsibility required action. Action required sacrifice. You expect me to announce this? He asked. I expect you not to pretend it doesn't exist. His breathing slowed, calculated. There are legal options, he said, carefully. The implication landed without him stating it directly. Mani's eyes sharpened. This not a problem to erase? For the first time, frustration cracked through his composure. You have no idea what this costs, he said. Her voice dropped lower. I do well. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he had not anticipated. She was not here to trap him. She was not here to threaten him. She was not here to bargain. She was here because the truth required acknowledgement. Outside the office, whispers had started. Two assistants stood closer than usual to the glass partition, pretending to review a tablet screen. They could not hear the words, but they saw tension written in posture. Kostya noticed them too. His reputation had always entered a room before he did. Today, doubt followed. What are you planning? He asked, finally. Imani lifted the folder from the desk and closed it neatly. I'm planning to have my child. The statement was simple, final. He stared at her, as if she had just shifted the axis of his world. And you're telling me this, he said slowly, because she met his eyes without hesitation. Because whether you stand beside us or not is your decision. But you will not claim ignorance later. The words struck with precision. She had removed his favorite defense before he could use it. The word us lingered longer than anything else she had said. Kostya did not move for several seconds. Us meant more than biology. What's meant permanence. Us meant his life would no longer operate within clean, controlled lines. You are assuming too much, he said finally. Mani shook her head once. No, I'm removing excuses. He exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. This was how he negotiated hostile acquisitions. Stay calm. Identify leverage. Apply pressure. You understand, he said carefully, that any association between us changes perception. She studied him. Perception of what? You know what. She did. California's tech elite was progressive in public and selective in private. Investors praised diversity panels while quietly maintaining comfort zones. Kostya had mastered that environment. He built a global empire as the disciplined Russian outsider who became Silicon Valley royalty. Clean image, strategic partnerships, predictable narrative. Imani did not look intimidated by that narrative. I'm not asking to move into your house, she said. I am not asking for your last name. Then what are you asking for? His voice sharpened slightly. She stepped closer, close enough that he could no longer hide behind posture. Don't reduce me to a mistake. The sentence landed with weight. His face hardened instinctively, but something flickered beneath it. Not guilt, not yet. Fear. He turned away again, pacing once across the office. The sun shifted slightly across the glass, light cutting across the floor between them like a boundary line. You could have handled this privately, he said. I am handling it privately. He stopped walking. This is not private, if it affects my company. Imani folded her arms loosely, not defensive. Anchored. Your company is not pregnant, she said quietly. He almost laughed at the bluntness, but the sound died in his throat. Outside, the hallway had grown still. One assistant stood frozen mid-step before being pulled away by another. Even without sound, conflict travels through walls. Kostya looked at her again. You think I can simply accept this and continue as before? No, she replied. I think nothing will continue as before. The honesty in that answer unsettled him more than defiance would have. He moved back to his desk and leaned against it, staring at the sonogram once more. The image did not look like a scandal. It looked small, fragile, real. You're certain, he said quietly. Yes, no hesitation, no drama, just certainty. He nodded once, though it was unclear whether he was agreeing or simply acknowledging reality. And if I choose distance? He asked. Imani's eyes did not leave his. Then I will still choose my child. The answer did not challenge him. It released him. Kostya straightened slowly. You're prepared to do this alone? He said. I'm prepared to do this right, Imani replied. That difference mattered. He walked back to the window one last time. California stretched beneath him, sunlight glinting off glass towers he had helped finance. For years, he believed control was strength. Define the rules. Enforce them. Stay untouched. Now the rule stood exposed as fragile. I built my name carefully, he said, without turning around. Every partnership, every headline. I chose them. Mani picked up her folder. And you chose me. There was no accusation in her voice, only the truth. He closed his eyes briefly. The memory of that night no longer felt like indulgence. It felt deliberate. I never promised you anything, he said. I never asked, she answered. That unsettled him again. She walked toward the door, stopping with her hand on the handle. Not dramatic, not emotional. I'm not asking for marriage, she continued. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking you to rewrite your life. He turned slowly. I'm asking you not to hide from it. The hallway outside had gone quiet. Assistants pretended to focus on screens, but their posture betrayed awareness. The blinds to his office were halfway lowered now. Protection by appearance. Kostya studied her face carefully. You expect an answer today? He asked. No, she said. I expect honesty when you give one. He held her gaze for several long seconds. For the first time since she entered, he did not speak. That silence was not denial. It was uncertainty. Mani opened the door. Before stepping out, she looked back once. I'm not asking you for anything, she said. I'm telling you the truth. Then she left. The door closed softly behind her. Kostya remained alone in the office, the sonogram still resting on his desk. Outside, California continued moving as if nothing had changed. Inside, everything had. Years before California ever called him visionary, Kostya Volkov was a son first. He grew up in a house where strength was measured in silence. His father rarely raised his voice. He did not need to. Expectations filled the room without discussion. Volkov men did not bend. They did not explain. They decided. At dinner, conversation revolved around legacy, power, reputation. His mother moved through the room with elegance, but her opinions rarely crossed the table. You must always control how people see you, his father told him once. Perception is currency. Kostya learned that early. He learned that weakness invites commentary. That desire complicates clarity. That emotion must be filtered before it becomes visible. When he left Russia for California to build his empire, he carried those rules with him. The tech world praised boldness, but it respected dominance. Investors admired innovation, but they trusted control. Kostya refined his father's lessons into something sharper. Do not let personal life blur public narrative. Do not let relationships shift leverage. Do not attach yourself where it complicates strategy. His circle in California reflected those principles. Women who fit easily into rooms filled with venture capital and legacy wealth. Women who understood branding. Women who complemented headlines. It was not hatred. It was a calculation. By the time he reached 40, the media described him with the same words repeatedly. Disciplined, strategic, reserved, focused. No one described him as romantic. That was intentional. California refined him. Silicon Valley did not care where he was born. It cared how he performed. Kostya learned quickly which rooms mattered and which voices shaped capital. Private clubs along the coast, fundraisers in hillside estates, tech summits in San Jose, where founders spoke about disruption while investors calculated returns. He watched carefully. The men who held real power did not always speak the loudest. They curated alliances. They married within networks. They kept relationships aligned with strategy. He noticed patterns. Founders dated women from similar backgrounds. Executives partnered with families already established in the ecosystem. Public images stayed consistent with private comfort. No one wrote these rules down, but they were visible. Kostya adjusted accordingly. He began attending events with women who fit seamlessly into his narrative. Educated, connected, familiar to the circles he needed. At first, it felt natural, efficient. Over time, it became a preference. When interviewers asked about his personal life, he kept answers short. "I focus on growth," he would say. "Relationships are secondary." It made him appear disciplined. The truth was simpler. He avoided complications that forced him to confront bias he never questioned. His world narrowed without him noticing, not because someone told him to exclude anyone, but because comfort quietly shaped choice. The first time he said it out loud, it did not feel controversial. During a late evening gathering in Palo Alto, a private estate owned by one of his early investors. Glass walls, heated terrace, venture capitalists discussing expansion into Asia, while servers moved discreetly between conversations. Kostya stood with 3 other executives near the balcony. The topic shifted to dating. One of the men joked about how public figures must be careful with their choices. Kostya shrugged. "I don't date black women," he said. "No anger, no edge, just a statement." The conversation moved on within seconds. No one challenged him. No one asked why. The comment slipped into the air and settled without friction. He did not consider it offensive. To him, it was a preference shaped by the environment. Later, during a tech podcast interview recorded in San Francisco, the host asked about balance in his life. "You keep a tight circle," she observed. "That intentional?" "Yes," he replied. "I am selective." Selective felt polished, neutral. In private, the language was blunter. He told himself it simplified things, reduced speculation, avoided scrutiny. The more he repeated it, the more it solidified. Preference became the rule. Rule became identity. He never paused to question the foundation of it. It aligned with the circles he moved in. It aligned with the image he cultivated, and because it never cost him anything, he never examined it. The media loved clarity. Kostya understood that. Profiles described him as disciplined, decisive, emotionally contained. Photographs captured him beside innovation awards and venture partners. Clean suits, measured smile, controlled posture. During one televised panel in Los Angeles, a moderator asked about leadership philosophy. "Consistency," Kostya answered. "You must know who you are and remain aligned with it." The audience nodded. He believed that answer. He did not see how narrow his alignment had become. Public image required repetition. Repetition required certainty. Over time, certainty hardened into pride. His dating life became predictable. Women introduced at charity galas. Conversations that fit into predictable scripts. social media images that caused no debate. He never needed to explain his preferences. They blended into expectation. When friends teased him privately about his standards, he dismissed it lightly. "I avoid distractions," he would say. No one pressed further. Success insulated him. California rewarded growth. It rarely challenged bias when profit remained steady. And so his statement lived comfortably inside his reputation. It felt harmless because it had never been tested. The first time he saw Imani Brooks, it was not at a party. It was in a boardroom overlooking downtown San Francisco. Volkov Enterprises had just acquired a smaller analytics firm based in Oakland. The integration meeting brought in senior strategists from both companies. New faces, new voices. Kostya entered the room expecting efficiency. He noticed her immediately, though he did not show it. Imani sat halfway down the long conference table, laptop open, posture upright. She wore no exaggerated confidence, no visible nerves either. When he began outlining restructuring plans, most of the room nodded. She did not. Halfway
As these
through
metrics
his
show, we've seen consistent growth.
she raised
This
her
positions us
hand
perfectly for the
slightly.
next phase.
With respect, she said, your forecast assumes uniform adoption across 3 demographics that historically respond differently to pricing shifts. The room went quiet. No one corrected him publicly. He looked at her, expression neutral. "Explain," he said. She did, clearly, without hesitation. She referenced data from the last 5 years in California markets. She outlined risks without dramatics. She did not soften her disagreement. He listened, not because he liked being challenged, because she was right. By the end of the meeting, he adjusted 2 projections. When the others filed out, he remained seated for a moment longer. He had spent years claiming certainty in his preferences, certainty in his boundaries. Yet something about the way she carried herself unsettled that neat structure. Not attraction at first, recognition, competence, confidence, calm strength that did not seek approval. She gathered her laptop and stood to leave. For the briefest second, their eyes met across the table. There was no flirtation, no tension acknowledged, just awareness. Kostya leaned back in his chair after she exited, staring at the empty seat she had occupied. He had built his image on rules. He did not yet know one of them had just met its first real challenge. Imani Brooks did not adjust herself to fit rooms. She entered them already aligned. Over the next few weeks, after that boardroom correction, Kostya noticed patterns. She arrived prepared. She spoke only when necessary. She never rushed to impress him. That alone separated her from most executives. During quarterly strategy reviews, she anticipated objections before they surfaced. She corrected errors without theatrics. She defended her data calmly, even when senior directors attempted to dismiss her. Kostya watched closely. Respect formed first, not because she agreed with him, because she did not. In meetings, she maintained eye contact without challenge. She did not shrink under pressure. She did not elevate her tone to compete with louder voices. Her presence felt grounded. One afternoon, during a product rollout discussion, a senior partner questioned her projections sharply. "You're overestimating adoption," he said. "These numbers are ambitious." Imani responded without irritation. "They're conservative. I accounted for delayed onboarding across 3 counties." She pulled up charts instantly. Clean, organized, undeniable. The partner leaned back. Kostya remained silent through the exchange, observing her precision. When the meeting ended, he lingered again. "You defend your analysis well," he said, as others filed out. "I defend accuracy," she replied. No flirtation, no attempt to soften the moment. He nodded once. Professional respect had rooted itself. He did not yet recognize that it was growing into something more complicated. Respect turned into rivalry. Not hostile, not dramatic, focused. Kostya began assigning her projects that tested limits, high-risk expansions, aggressive timelines, sensitive negotiations with partners in Los Angeles and Seattle. She met each one directly. When he revised her proposals, she revised his revisions. "You're compressing the rollout too quickly," she told him during one late afternoon session. "If we push this quarter, we'll burn out local teams." He leaned back in his chair. "You're assuming they cannot scale." "I'm assuming people are not machines." Their exchanges sharpened. The conference table became a space where intellect carried weight. Under dimmed lights during evening meetings, the rest of the executive team sometimes faded into background noise, while their dialogue took center stage. Neither raised their voice. Neither conceded easily. The tension was not personal. Its competitive clarity. He admired how she stood her ground. She admired that he listened when logic demanded it. Outside meetings, colleagues began to notice the pattern. "You two operate like adversaries," one director joked. Imani did not respond. Kostya gave a brief smile. The adversary was not accurate. They were equals in a room that rarely granted that balance. He told himself the energy between them was purely strategic. He told himself admiration did not cross into attraction. He told himself rules still stood firm. The shift began quietly, not in a dramatic moment, not in confession. It happened during pauses. A shared elevator ride after a 12-hour workday. The mirrored walls reflect 2 figures standing too close to pretend indifference. Neither spoke. San Francisco's lights flickered through the glass as the elevator descended. Their shoulders nearly touched. The silence felt heavier than any debate in the boardroom. When the doors opened, she stepped out first, without looking back. Later that week, they attended a leadership summit in Silicon Valley. Panels ran long. Investors pressed for updates. By evening, the conference hall had thinned. Kostya spotted her across the lobby, reviewing notes on her tablet. "You're still working he observed. Deadlines don't care about conferences, she replied. He almost smiled. They walked side by side toward the parking structure. The air was cooler outside, the city humming in the background. You challenge me more than most executives, he said. That's the job, she answered. He studied her profile as they walked. There was no effort in her confidence, no performance. That unsettled him, because attraction thrives where certainty weakens. He began noticing small details. The way she leaned forward when engaged in discussion, the way she paused before responding to ensure clarity, the way she refused to laugh at jokes she did not find amusing. These were not traits he had historically pursued. They did not align with his carefully curated circle. Yet they drew him in. One evening, after a long review session in the downtown office, the rest of the team left early. Only the two of them remained in the conference room. The city lights reflected faintly across the glass walls. "You're staring," she said, without looking up from her laptop. He did not deny it. "Just thinking," he replied. "About projections, about you." She finally looked at him then. The word hung between them. For the first time, professional distance felt fragile. She did not smile when he said it. "About me, how?" Imani asked. "Direct, calm, no softness," added. Kostya leaned back in his chair, fingers loosely folded. "You operate without fear," he said. "Most people adjust their tone around me. I adjust when necessary," she replied. "Not out of intimidation." He held her gaze. "I'm not easy to work with." "You're not supposed to be easy," she said. "You're supposed to be effective." The room was quiet, except for the hum of the building systems and distant traffic below. Professional tension had carried them this far. Now something else threaded through it. "You know my boundaries," he said carefully. "I know what you've said publicly," she answered. His jaw tightened slightly. "That wasn't public. It didn't need to be." The reference was clear. The line he had spoken months ago at a private gathering had circulated quietly through executive circles. "I don't date black women." She had heard it. He saw recognition in her expression now. Not hurt, not outrage. "Awareness. You think this is hypocrisy?" he asked. "I think this is human," she said. The response unsettled him more than criticism would have. Humans meant flawed. Human meant inconsistent. Humans meant his certainty was thinner than he liked. He stood and walked toward the glass wall. City lights stretching across the horizon. "You complicate things," he said. "I don't," she replied. "Your rule does." The tension between them was no longer intellectual. It was personal, slow, controlled, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with scandal and everything to do with proximity. He turned back toward her. "Stay," he said quietly. It was not an order, was a request. She hesitated, not because she was unsure of him, because she understood the shift. Boundaries once clear were now blurred. She closed her laptop slowly. "I'm not here to test your rule," she said. He stepped closer. Maybe the first aim. The air between them changed. Professional rivalry had carried them to this moment. Desire now stood waiting. The conference table remained between them for only a second longer. Marnie stood first. "You don't get to treat this like curiosity," she said evenly. "I'm not an experiment." Kostya moved around the table slowly, closing the distance. "You think I see you that way?" he asked. "I think you built a rule so you wouldn't have to question yourself." That landed harder than she intended. He stopped directly in front of her, now close enough to feel the shift in her breathing, close enough to test whether restraint was still held. "I don't question myself," he said. "That's the problem." Her voice was quiet, but steady. The city lights reflected across the glass behind him. From this height, California looked orderly, structured, controlled. Inside the room, control felt fragile. "You challenge me," he said. "That's still the job." It stopped feeling like just a job. There it was, clear, unfiltered. Imani searched his face for signs of mockery. There were none. "What are you asking for?" she asked. "An answer," he replied. "To what?" "To whether this tension is only in my head." She held his gaze for several seconds. The professional line had already been crossed the moment he admitted he was thinking about her. She did not step back. "No," she said quietly. The word was not rejection. It was confirmation. He reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. For a man who built his image on certainty, this moment carried more risk than any acquisition. "Once we step into this," she said, "you don't get to pretend you didn't." "I don't pretend," he replied. The irony of that statement lingered, unspoken. The conference room lights dimmed automatically as the building shifted into night mode. The glass walls reflected them, standing closer than executives should. Professional rivalry had turned into something undeniable. And as the city watched, from below, without knowing it, the first crack in his rule formed quietly between them. Rain pressed against the glass walls of the executive floor that night. San Francisco blurred beyond the windows. City lights softened by water sliding down in steady lines. The building had emptied hours earlier. Only security and a few distant cleaning crews remained. Kostya stood near the conference table, jacket draped over the back of a chair. The air felt different, less corporate, more exposed. Marnie had not left. They had both told themselves it was another late strategy session, another review before the upcoming expansion announcement. But neither of them opened a laptop. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm thinking about projections, about consequences." She crossed her arms loosely, watching him. "You don't have to do this," she said. The statement surprised him. "Do what?" he asked. "Prove something." He moved closer, not touching her yet. This isn't about proving anything. Then what is it about? He did not answer immediately. For a man trained to command rooms, he hesitated. That line I said, he admitted, it was convenient. Imani's eyes sharpened slightly. Convenient for what? For control? There it was. Vulnerability rarely entered his vocabulary. He stepped closer until there was no space left to pretend distance still existed. I built a life where everything aligns, he continued. Image, business, relationships. I don't align, she asked. He looked at her carefully. You disrupt it. The word was not criticism. It was a confession. Rain tapped harder against the glass, steady and rhythmic. The city beyond the window continued unaware. You could walk away, she said, softly. Keep your alignment. He reached for her hand slowly. Don't want to. The admission shifted everything. His hand remained in hers for a moment longer than necessary. Imani did not pull away. You understand, she said quietly. This isn't a rebellion against your rule. I know. Then what is it? Kostya studied her face, as if searching for language he rarely used. It's the first time I don't want to follow one. The honesty in that answer stripped away performance. She stepped closer, close enough that the scent of rain and city air clung to her coat. You don't get to treat me like an exception, she said. If you step forward, it's because you choose me, not because you're testing yourself. He nodded once. I'm choosing. The room felt smaller now, not because of walls, but because proximity demanded clarity. His fingers brushed her wrist, slow and deliberate. He gave her time again to stop him. She didn't. Desire did not rush them. It built gradually, shaped by weeks of restrained tension and measured conversation. He traced the edge of her jaw with careful restraint, as if memorizing something he had once decided not to notice. You don't flinch, he murmured. Why would I? She asked. Most people do. I'm not most people. That made him smile slightly. His jacket remained draped over the chair behind him, forgotten. The conference table that once separated them now stood irrelevant. He leaned in, giving her space to turn away. She didn't. The first kiss was not urgent. It was deliberate, a decision more than a reaction. Rain streaked the glass beside them. The city lights blurred into soft reflections against the window. In that moment, his rule no longer sounded like certainty. It sounded like fear he had never examined. The kiss deepened slowly, not reckless, not impulsive, measured. Imani's hands rested lightly against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath his tailored shirt. For once, Kostya did not lead with dominance. He paused often, reading her expression, adjusting to her pace. He had built his identity on restraint. Now restraint felt voluntary, not imposed. You're still thinking, she whispered against his mouth. "I won't stop thinking," he replied. "That might be the only thing holding you back." He let out a quiet breath that almost resembled a laugh. He moved his hands to her waist carefully, as though aware that this moment carried weight beyond physical desire. The tension that had built over months did not explode. It unfolded. She stepped closer. The rain outside intensified, striking the glass in a steady rhythm that matched the change in their breathing. "You can still step away," she said softly. He searched her face again. "And pretend this didn't exist?" he asked. "Yes." He shook his head. "Once. I don't want to pretend." That was the contradiction. The man who once stated his boundaries with certainty now crossed them willingly. He removed his suit jacket, fully, and placed it on the chair behind him. No rush, no hesitation. She loosened the tension in his tie, fingers steady. There was no performance at the moment, only mutual awareness that they were stepping into something irreversible. When he kissed her again, it carried less hesitation and more resolve. This was not rebellion. It was surrender to the truth he had denied. They moved from the conference room to his private office without speaking. The rain continued against the glass, streaking the skyline into blurred lights. Inside, the room felt warmer, smaller. Kostya closed the door behind them, not to hide, but to protect the moment from interruption. Imani stood near the window, city lights reflecting faintly against her skin. She did not rush him. She did not chase the tension. She let it settle. He approached slowly. For a man known for control, this felt unfamiliar, not because of desire, because of vulnerability. "You're not afraid," he said quietly. "I don't step into things I don't understand," she replied. "And you understand this. I understand you." That unsettled him more than any accusation ever had. He reached for her again, this time with certainty. The space between them closed naturally. The rain created a soft rhythm outside, isolating them from the rest of California's restless movement. He kissed her with more depth now, no longer testing the line. His hands moved with care, not urgency. She responded with equal intention. There was no performance in it, no dominance, no submission, only mutual choice. For the first time in years, Kostya did not calculate consequences. He did not think about headlines. He did not think about investors. He allowed himself to feel. When they finally pulled back, breath steady but altered, he rested his forehead lightly against hers. "You complicate everything," he murmured. "You already said that," she replied. He gave a faint smile. "I meant it differently this time." Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the bay. Inside, something had shifted permanently. He had crossed his own boundary, not by accident, by decision. Morning arrived without drama. The rain had stopped. California's sunlight filtered through the glass, sharp and revealing. Mani woke up first. Kostya was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, in his private suite, attached to the executive floor. His back was to her, shoulders squared. Silence, heavy. The city below had resumed its rhythm. Traffic moved. Markets opened. Headlines refreshed. He had already stepped back into himself. She watched him for a moment before speaking. "You're thinking about damage control." He did not deny it. "I'm thinking about impact," he replied. There was a difference in tone, now measured, guarded. She sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around her without urgency. "You said you don't pretend," she reminded him. "I don't," he said. But he was already calculating. She could see it in the way his posture shifted, the way distance returned to his voice. He stood and began dressing without looking at her. "Last night doesn't change who I am," he said carefully. She felt the shift immediately. "It should," she answered. He paused for half a second before continuing to button his shirt. "You know my position," he added. There it was, the rule returning. Imani stepped out of the bed and dressed quietly. No raised voice, no argument. When she finished, she walked toward him. "This wasn't a mistake," she said. He met her eyes briefly. "I didn't say it all, but you're already stepping back." He held her gaze longer this time. "I have responsibilities." "I don't." The question lingered. He did not respond. Silence filled the space again, but this time it felt colder. She picked up her bag and moved toward the door. "You don't get to divide who you are in public from who you are in private forever," she said. He did not follow her. As she opened the door, she sensed it clearly. He would retreat emotionally, not because he regretted the night, but because facing what it meant required more courage than crossing the line had. She stepped out into the hallway without looking back. Inside the suite, Kostya remained still, sunlight cutting across the floor. He had broken his own rule. But whether he would own it was another question entirely. The first sign was subtle. Mani dismissed it at first. Long hours, stress, travel between Oakland and San Francisco offices, sleepless nights following the shift in her dynamic with Kostya. Her body felt different, slower in the mornings, slight nausea that arrived without warning, a heaviness she could not attribute to exhaustion alone. She counted dates in her head one evening while standing in her apartment kitchen overlooking the Oakland skyline. The realization stopped her mid-step. "No," she recalculated. Again, the memory of that rain-soaked night returned without invitation. Her breath tightened. She sat down slowly at the small dining table and stared at her phone screen. Denial arrived first. It's stressful. It's irregular timing. It's nothing. But her body felt certain in a way her thoughts did not. The next morning, she purchased a test on her way home from work. She chose the self-checkout lane, avoiding eye contact with anyone nearby. Back inside her apartment, the silence felt amplified. She followed the instructions carefully, waited, watched. The results appeared clearly. Positive. The word did not feel dramatic. It felt heavy. She lowered herself onto the bathroom floor, back against the cool tile, staring at the small device in her hand. Shock did not come with tears. It came with stillness. The clinic hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and quiet routine. Imani sat upright in a cushioned chair, hands folded loosely in her lap. Around her, other women scrolled through phones or stared at muted televisions mounted on the wall. Life continued in ordinary rhythms. Her appointment had been scheduled quickly. She told herself confirmation would bring clarity. Instead, it brought reality. When her name was called, she followed the nurse down a narrow corridor painted in soft, neutral tones. The room she entered felt clinical, but calm. "First pregnancy?" the nurse asked gently. Mani nodded. Yes. The word felt unfamiliar on her tongue. She changed into the provided gown and lay back as the technician prepared the equipment. The room dimmed slightly as the screen came to life. Cold gel touched her skin. She stared at the ceiling until the technician turned the monitor toward her. "There," the technician said softly. A faint glow appeared on the screen. Small, flickering. Imani leaned forward slightly. Breath caught in her throat. That glow was not abstract, was alive. Shock shifted into something deeper. Reality? Her hand moved instinctively to her abdomen. No one else in the room understood the complexity unfolding behind her steady expression. The technician printed images and handed them to her. "Congratulations," she said. Imani accepted the papers carefully. The word congratulations echoed strangely in her mind. Outside the clinic, California's sunlight felt too bright. She stood on the sidewalk for several minutes before walking toward her car. The sonogram rested in her purse, like quiet evidence of a decision forming. Isolation arrived quietly, not because she lacked support, because this truth felt singular. That evening, Imani sat alone in her Oakland apartment, the sonogram placed on the coffee table in front of her. The city lights flickered beyond her window, but her focus remained fixed on the black and white image. She replayed the morning after that night. Kostya's posture, his measured tone, the distance that returned before she even left the building. He had crossed his own boundary, but he had not dismantled it. Fear surfaced next. Not fear of motherhood, fear of confrontation. She knew his world. Investors who valued image, board members who calculated optics, social circles that tolerated bias quietly, as long as profit remained strong. Where would she stand in that world? Where would the child stand? Her phone buzzed with a routine work notification. She ignored it. For the first time in years, strategy did not dominate her thoughts. Responsibility did. She rose from the couch and walked toward the kitchen, resting her hand lightly against her stomach again. "This is real," she whispered to herself. Her voice did not tremble. Fear did not weaken her. It sharpened her. She would not allow this life to be framed as inconvenience. She would not let herself be reduced to an exception. The decision was not fully formed yet, but it was growing. The next morning, clarity replaced fear. Imani woke before her alarm. She did not feel overwhelmed. She felt focused. She sat upright in bed and allowed the truth to settle fully in her mind. This was not an accident to conceal. This was not a crisis to erase. This was a life. She walked to the bathroom mirror and studied her reflection. The woman staring back at her looked composed, strong, unshaken. "You will not shrink," she said quietly. The words were not dramatic. They were direct. She made coffee and opened her laptop, not for work, but for research. Health guidelines, timeline planning, support structures available in California, legal rights. Information brought control. Control brought calm. By midday, she had already scheduled follow-up appointments. She marked the dates on her digital calendar carefully. Each square on that calendar represented progress. Her phone hovered in her hand more than once. She could tell him through a message. She could delay the conversation. She could wait until she felt safer. But delay would weaken her position emotionally. She refused to approach this from fear. This was not about securing his approval. It was about giving him the truth. She opened her contacts and scrolled to his name. Kostya Volkov. Her thumb paused. This conversation would change the trajectory of both their lives. She inhaled slowly. Then she closed the phone. Not yet. She would not call impulsively. She would look him in the eye. Imani did not wait long. 2 days later, she requested a private meeting through his executive assistant. No explanation, just a time. He approved it within minutes. That told her something. She chose her outfit carefully that morning. Not to impress him, not to soften the message, but to stand steady. When she entered Volkov Enterprises, the building felt the same as always. Glass, precision, quiet ambition humming beneath every conversation. But she felt different. The sonogram rested inside a slim folder in her hand. She took the elevator to the executive floor, alone. The mirrored walls reflected her calm expression back at her. No tears, no hesitation. The hallway outside his office was active, but the atmosphere shifted slightly when she passed. A few assistants glanced up. She nodded once and continued. When she reached his door, she did not knock immediately. She allowed herself one final breath. This was not a negotiation. This was a disclosure. She raised her hand and tapped twice. "Come in!" his voice called from inside. The door opened. California sunlight filled the office, bright and revealing. Kostya looked up from his desk. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Without speaking, she walked forward and placed the folder on his desk. Then she opened it. The sonogram lay between them. The room fell silent. He stared at the image, and the lie he once stated so easily now faced proof. The sonogram lay flat on Kostya's desk. Sunlight cut across the paper, highlighting the small shape at the center. He did not sit. Neither did she. "This is verified," he said, after several long seconds. "Yes." His voice carried none of the disbelief from their first confrontation. Only calculation. How far along? 8 weeks. He absorbed that silently. 8 weeks meant this was no longer theoretical, no longer reversible, without intention. He moved behind his desk, slowly, lowering himself into his chair, as if the weight of it had changed. "What are you expecting from me?" he asked. Imani did not hesitate. "I'm keeping the baby." There was no tremor in her voice, no pause. He looked up sharply. "That isn't what I asked." "I know." The statement settled heavily in the room. "You made the decision already?" he asked. "Yes." No negotiation, no invitation for input. Strength stood in front of him again. The same strength that once challenged his projections in a boardroom. Only this time, the stakes were personal. "You should have discussed it with me," he said. "I am discussing it with you," she replied. "After deciding, I don't need permission to protect my child." The word child landed differently than pregnancy had. It made the situation human. Kostya leaned back, running a hand slowly over his face. "This impacts more than you," he said carefully. "It impacts us," she corrected. He did not respond to that immediately. The midpoint of their conflict had arrived, and this time she was not asking. Kostya rose from his chair abruptly and walked toward the window. San Francisco stretched beneath him, ordered and predictable. "This will not stay contained," he said, without turning around. "If this becomes public, it affects investor confidence. It affects board stability. It affects market perception." Mani remained steady. "You're thinking about reputation. I'm thinking about responsibility." She shook her head slightly. "You're thinking about headlines." He turned sharply. "You don't understand how fragile positioning can be at this level. And you don't understand how fragile life is at any level." The silence that followed felt heavier than their previous arguments. He walked back to the desk and picked up the sonogram again. "This could cost me," he said quietly. She stepped closer. "It will cost me, too." "For you, it's personal," he replied. "For you, it's personal, too," she said. "You just don't want it to be." He exhaled sharply, tension visible in the tightness of his jaw. "There are options," he began carefully. She cut him off. "There aren't." The firmness in her voice left no space for suggestion. "I'm keeping this baby." The words carried no hostility, only finality. He stared at her for several seconds. "This changes everything," he said. "Yes, and you're willing to accept that?" "I already have." Before we move forward, ask yourself this. Would you choose dignity over comfort in a moment like this? The shift in power was subtle, but unmistakable. Kostya was used to directing outcomes, negotiating from advantage. controlling narratives before they reached daylight. Now, he stood in a room where control no longer belonged to him. "You're putting me in a position," he said. "I'm giving you one," Imani replied. He stared at her. "There's a difference." "Yes," she said. "This one is honest." He paced once across the office, stopping near the glass wall. His reflection looked composed, but his thoughts moved fast. "If this becomes public, the board will ask questions," he said. "They will look at timing. They will look at consistency. They will look at me." "They should," she answered. He turned back toward her, sharply. "You think I'm afraid of scrutiny? I think you're afraid of contradiction." That struck closer to the truth than he liked. His entire public identity rested on discipline, predictability, structure. This was messy, unplanned. Humans. "You expect me to stand in front of my board and admit this?" he asked. "I expect you not to deny it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If I choose distance." She held his gaze. "Then I will still raise this child with or without your name attached." The statement was not a threat. It was a certainty. For the first time, he understood something clearly. She did not need him to survive this. She wanted him to show up. That difference unsettled him deeply. His phone buzzed on the desk. The timing felt deliberate. Kostya glanced at the screen. A text from his chief operations officer. "We need to talk." Bored, hearing something, he did not respond immediately. Imani noticed the change in his posture. "Already?" she asked. He nodded once. "Rumors move faster than facts," he said. He stepped away from her and made a brief call, voice low but controlled. "Who said it?" he asked. A pause. "No, do not speculate. I will handle it." He ended the call and stood still for a moment, jaw tight. "Someone saw you leave that night," he said. "Security footage exists. Conversations happen." "I wasn't hiding," she replied. "That's not how this works. Maybe that's the problem." He ran a hand through his hair. Frustration, visible now. "You don't understand board politics," he said. "I understand accountability." His phone buzzed again. This time, a calendar update appeared. "Emergency executive meeting. Today, 4 p.m. He looked at the time. 3 hours. The boardroom doors would close. Directors would ask direct questions. They would demand clarity before investors demanded reassurance. The decision he thought he could delay had arrived. "This accelerating," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. He looked at her, eyes no longer defensive, but conflicted. "You knew this would happen," he said. "I knew the truth doesn't stay contained." He stared at the sonogram again, the image now feeling less like disruption and more like inevitability. He had two choices: deny publicly and distance privately, or acknowledge fully and absorb the consequences. The office felt smaller as the clock ticked toward 4. Kostya remained standing behind his desk, staring at the sonogram one final time before sliding it carefully back into the folder. Imani watched him without speaking. "Once I walk into that room," he said quietly, "there is no middle ground." "There never was," she replied. He lifted his gaze to hers. "You understand what they'll say." "Yes, they will question judgment. Yes, they will question consistency. Yes, you're prepared for that." She stepped closer, steady. "I've been prepared since the moment I saw the result." That settled something inside him. For months, he had operated under the illusion that he controlled every narrative attached to his name. Now the narrative demanded integrity. He moved toward the door, pausing just before opening it. "If I do this," he said, without turning around, "it won't be partial." "I'm not asking for partial," she answered. He nodded. He nodded once. The decision was not dramatic. It was deliberate. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Executives moved aside instinctively. Assistants straightened posture. Word had already traveled. At the far end of the corridor, the boardroom doors stood closed. Waiting. Inside, directors gathered. Conversations quieted as he approached. Imani remained in his office for a moment longer, standing near the window. She could see the boardroom from across the floor through partial glass. The doors opened. Kostya entered. The doors closed behind him. The boardroom doors remained closed for nearly 2 hours. Outside, the executive floor moved in restrained tension. Assistants avoided eye contact. Senior managers pretended to review reports that no one was reading. By the time Kostya stepped out, his expression revealed nothing. But silence rarely holds. By early evening, the first article appeared online. Anonymous source suggests internal issue at Volkov Enterprises. It did not mention pregnancy, did not mention Imani. But speculation does not need detail to gain traction. Within an hour, financial blogs began posting follow-up pieces. Leadership instability, rumored ahead of quarterly announcement. Phones buzzed across the executive floor. Notifications stacked. Screens refreshed. Imani saw the headlines before anyone approached her directly. She sat at her desk in Oakland, scrolling through the articles without reacting. Her name had not surfaced. Not yet. But the tone was shifting. Kostya's phone rang repeatedly. Investors requesting reassurance. Partners seeking clarity. Media contacts fishing for confirmation. He answered none of them personally. Instead, he forwarded communications to public relations. "Draft a holding statement," he instructed. "No admissions. No denials." His voice remained controlled. Inside, tension tightened. The public image had started to crack, not from scandal, from uncertainty. By the next morning, speculation sharpened. Financial outlets shifted tone. Volkov Enterprises, facing internal disruption questions, surround CEO stability. Still no confirmation. Still no detail. But investors Dislike, silence. Kostya arrived at the office earlier than usual. The lobby felt different. Conversations paused when he passed. The security team maintained their usual composure. Yet, even they seemed alert. His phone buzzed non-stop. Private equity partners, board members, a long-standing venture capital ally requesting immediate clarification. He stepped into his office and closed the door firmly. Another call came through. "This better not be what I'm hearing," one investor said without greeting. "What are you hearing?" Kostya replied calmly, "That you've made a personal decision that could affect brand positioning." Kostya's jaw tightened. "My personal life does not destabilize this company," he said. "It does, if it contradicts the identity you've built." There it was. Contradiction. After the call ended, he remained still for a moment. His image had always been defined by discipline. Now, investors questioned consistency. Across the bay, Imani felt the shift too. A colleague forwarded her a link. "You okay?" The message read. She typed back a simple response. "I'm fine." Public noise had begun. She chose silence. The interference did not come from investors alone. It came from my family. Kostya's mother called first. Her voice carried restraint, sharpened by concern. "I am hearing things," she said. "Tell me they are exaggerated." He did not answer immediately. Silence stretched across continents. "They're a woman?" she asked. "Yes." A pause. "She appropriate?" His mother continued carefully. The question did not require explanation. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the skyline. "She is competent," he said. "That is not what I asked." He exhaled slowly. "She is carrying my child." The line went quiet. When his mother spoke again, her tone had shifted. "This complicates alliances." "It complicates nothing," he replied. "It complicates perception," she corrected. The same word again. Perception. Later that afternoon, his older cousin, who managed international branches, sent a brief message. "You built your position carefully. Do not dismantle it impulsively." Kostya stared at the text without responding. Across the city, Imani's phone buzzed too. An unfamiliar number? She hesitated before answering. "This is Elena Volkov," the woman said. Kostya's mother. Mani's posture straightened. "Yes, I wanted to hear your voice," Elena said. Before assumptions harden, Imani remained composed. "I have nothing to hide." The conversation remained polite. Controlled, but beneath it, lines were being drawn. Family interference had entered the equation. The pressure was no longer confined to corporate walls. By midweek, silence was no longer an option. A regional business outlet published a direct headline. Volkov Enterprises CEO facing personal allegations. No names were listed, no confirmation given. But the speculation was clear. Within hours, financial analysts began asking about leadership focus during investor calls. Social media threads dissected every public appearance Kostya had made in the last month. Images were reposted. Timelines questioned. His phone vibrated continuously across the glass surface of his desk. He ignored most of it. Instead, he called an emergency session with the board. The blinds in the boardroom were drawn halfway down. Directors took their seats one by one. Expressions controlled but firm. Imani did not attend. She remained in her Oakland office, reviewing strategy reports as if nothing had shifted. Colleagues glanced toward her occasionally, unsure whether to ask questions or remain distant. She offered no explanation. Her silence was not fear. It was strength. Back in San Francisco, the boardroom door closed. One director leaned forward. "We need clarity," he said. Another added, "If there is personal involvement affecting leadership, it must be addressed before markets open tomorrow." Kostya remained standing at the head of the table. The sonogram was not present. But the truth was, outside the room, assistants moved carefully, aware something critical was unfolding. Inside, the board demanded a statement. The boardroom felt colder than usual, not in temperature, in tone. Kostya stood at the head of the long table, hands resting lightly on the polished surface. Directors watched him carefully, not with hostility, but with expectation. "We are hearing consistent reports," one board member said. "Before this escalates further, we need clarity." Kostya did not sit. He had spent years commanding rooms like this with certainty. Today, certainty required something different. "There is a personal matter," he began. The room went still. "It does not affect company operations," he continued. "That depends," another director replied. "On what the matter is." Silence stretched. Kostya thought of the rain that night, the conference room, the rule he had once spoken casually, the sonogram resting on his desk. He could deny, he could minimize, he could call it a rumor, and move forward. Instead, he said, "An employee is pregnant." The room shifted immediately. "Is it yours?" a director asked directly. Yes, the word carried weight. No excuses, no qualification, just the truth. One director leaned back, absorbing the admission. "This consensual?" another asked. "Yes." A pause. "And are you prepared for this to become public?" Kostya did not answer immediately. That was the real question. Public meant headlines. Public meant scrutiny. Public meant confronting the contradiction between the rule he had once stated and the reality he now acknowledged. "I am prepared to address it," he said finally. The board members exchanged glances. "This requires a statement," the chairman said. "Controlled. Timely. Before markets react." Kostya nodded once. Outside the boardroom, California sunlight filtered through partial blinds, casting muted lines across the hallway floor. Inside, the private truth had crossed into corporate consequence. The board did not panic. They calculated. "Timing is critical," the chairman said. "If we release a statement, it must be direct. No ambiguity." Another director leaned forward. "Your past comments may surface, she added. We cannot ignore that risk. Kostya held her gaze. I won't. That answer surprised even him. One of the senior directors cleared his throat. Are you maintaining your position as CEO through this? Yes, Kostya replied, without hesitation. Then the narrative must be leadership under scrutiny, not instability. The language was clinical, strategic, but beneath it, a deeper question lingered. Would he own the contradiction fully? The meeting adjourned with instructions to draft a preliminary statement. Public relations would prepare language. Legal would review exposure. As the directors filed out, the chairman paused beside Kostya. This is personal, he said quietly, but your response will define you more than the situation itself. Kostya nodded once. When the room emptied, he remained alone for several seconds. His phone buzzed again. This time, he did not ignore it. He opened his messages and scrolled to Imani's name. We need to talk before anything is released. Across the bay, her phone vibrated on her desk. She read the message once. Then she typed back. Come here. Kostya arrived at her Oakland apartment just after sunset. No driver, no assistant. He parked his car himself and stood outside the building for a moment before entering, as if crossing a threshold he could no longer pretend was separate from his public life. When she opened the door, she did not invite him in immediately. You told them, she said. Yes. How much? That it's mine? She studied his face carefully, searching for hesitation. I didn't mention your name, he added. Yet, she replied. He stepped inside. Her apartment felt smaller than his office, but steadier. No glass walls, no skyline demanding posture, just warm light and quiet. They want a statement, he said, before markets open tomorrow. And they want control of the narrative. Imani crossed her arms loosely. And what do you want? The question lingered longer than he expected. For this not to define the company, he answered. That wasn't the question. He met her gaze. I want to handle it without damaging you. That was closer to the truth. She walked toward the window, looking out at the city lights stretching toward the bay. You already built a rule that damaged me, she said calmly. This is about whether you correct it. He stepped closer. They will bring up what I said. I know they will frame this as a contradiction. It is. He exhaled slowly. You're not asking me to protect my image, he said. No, you're asking me to dismantle it. She turned to face him. Oh, I'm asking you to stop hiding behind it. The room felt quieter than the boardroom had, because here there were no directors, only the truth. Kostya stood in the center of her living room. No desk to lean on, no skyline to hide behind. If I release this, he said carefully, it won't be a controlled leak. It will be a full acknowledgement. Good, Imani replied. He studied her expression. You're not afraid? He asked. Of truth? No. Of backlash? She held his gaze. I've lived with assumptions my whole life. This won't be new. That unsettled him. He had built defenses around his identity for decades. She had built resilience without needing headlines to validate it. The board wants stability, he said. Investors want predictability. And you? She asked. He hesitated. Want to do this correctly? Then say it plainly, she said. Say you were wrong. The simplicity of that instruction felt heavier than any legal briefing. You think an apology fixes this? He asked. No, she said. Ownership does. He walked toward the kitchen counter and rested his hands against it, looking down briefly before meeting her eyes again. I said I don't date black women, he admitted. That statement was built on comfort. On assumption, she waited. I crossed that boundary, he continued. Not by accident. Then say that, she replied. He nodded slowly. If this becomes public, he said, there will be commentary. About you, about us. I'm not asking to be shielded, she answered. I'm asking not to be erased. The distinction mattered. He moved closer, lowering his voice. If I stand in front of cameras tomorrow and acknowledge this, it will change perception permanently. Yes, and you're prepared for that? She stepped closer as well. I've already chosen. He understood then. The decision had never been about whether he would have a child. It was about whether he would have integrity. They stood facing each other in the quiet of her apartment. No board members, no investors, no headlines, only consequence. Kostya reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. The draft statement from public relations sat open in his email, carefully worded, neutral, detached. He handed it to her. She read silently. Volkov Enterprises confirms that CEO Kostya Volkov is addressing a personal matter that does not affect company performance. She looked up. This sounds like damage control, she said. It is. Where am I in this? He did not answer immediately. She handed the phone back to him. If you're going to speak, she said, speak as a man, not a brand. The words settled deeply. He opened the draft again and began editing, not removing, not softening, rewriting. He typed slowly. I previously made a statement about my dating preferences.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Preferences that reflected bias rather than character. I was wrong. I am expecting a child with a woman I respect. I will take responsibility fully, both privately and publicly. He stopped typing. The room felt still. That's the truth, he said quietly. She nodded once. And tomorrow? She asked. Tomorrow I will say it, my Herr Elf. No spokesperson. No filtered release. No strategic leak. He would stand in front of cameras and own it. For the first time since the sonogram touched his desk, his decision felt complete. He placed the phone back in his pocket. I'm not doing this halfway, he said. I know, she replied. Outside, California traffic moved steadily along the freeway. The city had no idea what statement would shape its headlines the next morning. Inside, the private truth had transformed into public resolve. Tomorrow, perception will shift. Cameras lined the front of the boardroom. Not the national press. Not yet. But enough media to shift markets. Kostya stood behind a slim podium positioned at the head of the long table. Directors sat behind him in composed silence. Legal counsel to his right. Communications team to his left. Imani sat near the back of the room. Not hidden, not highlighted, present. The blinds were partially lifted, allowing California sunlight to filter into the space. The city beyond the glass carried on, unaware that a statement was about to redirect conversation across financial platforms. Microphones waited. Phones recorded. Kostya adjusted the podium slightly, not out of nerves, but to create pause. Silence settled across the room. He had addressed shareholders during the crisis. He had spoken at global summits. He had negotiated acquisitions under scrutiny. This felt different because this time the risk was personal. He began, "Thank you for being here." His voice carried clearly. "There has been speculation regarding my personal life. No defensiveness. No attempt to redirect." He let the statement set. Directors watched carefully, some faces neutral, others guarded. Cameras zoomed slightly. He continued, "I want to address this directly." His eyes scanned the room once, briefly landing on Imani before returning forward. For a moment, he said nothing. Silence thickened. Markets waited. So did she. Kostya gripped the edge of the podium lightly. "This is not a company issue," he said. "It is a personal one." A faint murmur moved through the room. Directors remained composed, but attention sharpened. "I previously made a statement about my dating preferences," he continued. "That statement reflected bias rather than character." The words landed without softness. Cameras clicked. Journalists leaned forward slightly. What was wrong? No explanation, no justification. Just ownership. Behind him, one director shifted in his seat. Another folded her hands tighter together. Kostya did not rush the next sentence. "I am expecting a child with a woman I respect." The room reacted subtly. A few raised eyebrows, quick glances exchanged. Mani remained still. He could feel the tension pulling in two directions. Protect the brand, protect the truth. He continued, "This situation does not alter the performance or stability of Volkov Enterprises. It does, however, require accountability from me." He paused. Silence returned. Before he speaks his final sentence, ask yourself this. What decision do you think he will make right now? The room held its breath. Kostya looked down briefly at the prepared notes on the podium. Then he pushed them aside. He did not need them. "For years," he said, voice steady, "I built my image on control, on discipline, on clearly defined boundaries." He lifted his gaze toward the cameras. One of those boundaries was wrong. Silence deepened. I said, I do not date black women. The sentence echoed differently in a public setting than it had in private rooms. Gasps were not loud, but they were present. He did not retreat. That statement was rooted in comfort, not character. Imani felt the weight of the moment from the back of the room, not as a spectacle, as a correction. I crossed that boundary, he continued, not by accident, by choice. He allowed that to sit. I do not regret the choice. A director shifted slightly behind him. Cameras zoomed closer. He glanced once toward Imani, not as acknowledgement for the press, as confirmation. I will take responsibility fully, he said. As a father, the word father carried more weight than CEO ever had. The silence that followed felt different, not tense, released. Questions came immediately. Will this affect your leadership? A reporter asked. No, Kostya replied, without hesitation. Will the child's mother remain with the company? He paused briefly before answering. She will remain where she chooses to remain, he said. Her position is earned, not granted. Another journalist leaned forward. Do you regret your previous comments? Yes. Clear. No hedging. Yes, he repeated. Directors behind him watched carefully. Some nodded subtly. Others remained reserved. Imani did not look down. She did not shift in her seat. For the first time since the rumors began, her name no longer felt like a liability in the room. It felt acknowledged. The chairman stepped forward to conclude the conference. Volkov Enterprises remains stable, he said. Leadership stands unified. The microphones were lowered. Cameras stopped recording. But the moment had already moved beyond the room. Phones vibrated across the building. Markets reacted. Social feeds refreshed with headlines that no longer speculated. They confirmed. Kostya stepped away from the podium and exhaled slowly. He had chosen, and in choosing publicly, he had dismantled the rule entirely. The headlines shifted within hours. Volkov CEO admits bias, announces fatherhood market, reacts to personal disclosure. Some praised his honesty. Others criticized his past statement more loudly than before. Stock prices dipped briefly in morning trading, then stabilized by afternoon. Analysts debated whether the transparency strengthened or weakened leadership. The reputation did not collapse. It changed. Board members issued supportive remarks. A few investors remained cautious. Social media divided into predictable camps. Kostya read none of it directly. He delegated monitoring to communications and turned his focus inward. For the first time in years, he did not attempt to shape perception aggressively. He allowed it to evolve. At Volkov Enterprises, whispers shifted tone. The CEO, who once spoke rigidly about preference, had stood publicly and dismantled it. That mattered. In Oakland, Imani walked into the office without lowering her eyes. A few colleagues offered quiet congratulations. Others kept their distance, uncertain how to navigate the shift. She maintained her composure. This was not a spectacle, was life. By evening, Kostya arrived at her apartment without announcement. No press, no statements, just presence. He stepped inside and closed the door softly. "I did what I said I would," he told her. "Yes," she replied. There was no dramatic embrace, only calm. Public tension had begun to dissolve. Private clarity replaced it. Backlash did not disappear overnight. Clips of his old statement resurfaced repeatedly online. Commentators debated authenticity. Some questioned the timing. Others dismissed the apology as strategic. Kostya did not issue follow-up defenses. He showed up to work. He attended meetings. He included Imani in strategy sessions publicly, not as a display, but as normal practice. Consistency replaced damage control. Investors adjusted. Markets stabilized. Media cycles moved on to newer controversies. Integrity, once questioned, became part of the narrative. Months passed. Imani's pregnancy became visible. They did not stage photographs. They did not curate announcements. They allowed life to unfold quietly. The first time Kostya felt the baby move, his expression shifted in a way no boardroom ever managed to produce. He placed his hand gently against her stomach, eyes soft with recognition. "This is real," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. He had built empires through certainty. Now certainty came in a different form, not in control, in responsibility. The hospital room overlooked the San Francisco Bay. Night pressed softly against the glass, city lights shimmering in the distance. Imani gripped his hand during contractions, breath steady but strained. No board members, no reporters, no investors, just the rhythm of life demanding entrance. Kostya remained beside her the entire time, not pacing, not issuing calls, present. When the final push came, the room shifted from tension to sound. A cry? Sharp, immediate, alive. The nurse placed the baby gently into Imani's arms first. Kostya stepped closer slowly, as if approaching something sacred. "Do you want to hold him?" the nurse asked. He nodded. The weight settled into his arms carefully. Small, warm, certain. He stared down at his son, eyes no longer guarded. "This is my child," he whispered. No boardroom had ever required this level of courage. No microphone had ever carried this much truth. He leaned toward Imani, voice low and steady. "I was wrong," he said, without excuses. She looked at him quietly. "I know," she replied. His identity no longer rested on rules he once defended. It rested here, in his arms. Morning light filled the hospital room slowly. The world outside had already moved on to new headlines. Markets opened, traffic thickened along the Bay Bridge. Tech founders pitched new ideas to investors who had stopped discussing Kostya days ago. Inside the room, time felt different. Imani rested against the pillows, watching Kostya stand near the window with their son in his arms. He held the baby carefully, not awkwardly, not stiff, protective. For a man who once built identity around exclusion, this moment rewrote everything quietly. He turned back toward the bed. "I used to believe control was strength," he said. She listened. "I thought defining limits made me disciplined." "Now?" she asked. He looked down at the small face resting against his chest. "Now I understand. Strength is ownership." No cameras captured that sentence. No analysts interpreted it. It existed only between them. Over the following weeks, his life shifted in practical ways. Fewer late-night events, fewer social appearances shaped for image. More evenings spent in Oakland, more mornings beginning with responsibility rather than reputation. Volkov Enterprises continued to perform, but his legacy no longer centered on quarterly reports alone. It centered on consistency between words and actions. He did not attempt to erase his past statement from history. He allowed it to remain as evidence of growth. And when their son wrapped his tiny fingers around Kostya's thumb for the first time, the transformation completed itself. A man without rules, but not without values. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes accountability defines character. Subscribe and like for more grounded love stories that reflect growth, responsibility, and real change.